My name is Celine Morgan. I'm 30 years old. And this morning, while paying rent, I noticed a $6,200 charge on my trust account to a bridal boutique in Charleston, one I've never set foot in. I'm not engaged. I sat still at the kitchen table, fingers hovering above the keyboard, the rent portal waiting for me to confirm payment. My coffee had gone cold. Outside, someone was mowing their lawn. A dog barked distantly. Life kept moving, but something had cracked. The charge was time-stamped 2 days ago. Boutique name, Maison de Mariée. I googled it. French-inspired, absurdly expensive. The kind of place that serves you champagne while you pick out lace you'll only wear once. I called the number listed on the receipt. A woman answered in a polished southern drawl. "Thank you for calling Maison de Mariée. This is Caroline." "Hi," I said. "I'm trying to confirm a purchase. $6,200. It hit my trust account." "Certainly. Do you have the name it was placed under?" I gave my full name. She hesitated. "Oh yes. It was your sister who came in, I believe. Ariana Morgan? With your mother? They mentioned you'd be covering the deposit. She said it was pre-approved." I didn't say anything. "Is everything all right?" Caroline asked. I cleared my throat. "No issue? Thank you for confirming." She chirped some pleasantry. I hung up before the end of it. There was a notification on my phone Venmo from a friend. "Dinner Friday? You in?" I didn't respond. I opened Instagram instead. I wasn't even looking for it, not really. But there it was. A photo tagged at Maison de Mariée. My mother and Ariana, champagne flutes in hand. The caption, "Some people dream in white. We make it real." There were 3 heart emojis, 2 comments, and one truth I could no longer look away from. I tried to remember if Ariana had even told me she was engaged, or if this was just another version of her being in love again, which my mother always framed as a kind of fragile medical condition, a heartbreak recovery plan funded by someone else's stability. I clicked the home button, locked the screen, just stared. My phone buzzed, a message from my mom. "Your sister's been through a lot, Celine. You'd understand if you weren't so selfish." That word again. Selfish. The word they use when you start to question the expectations you never agreed to. I didn't reply. I didn't scream either. I opened my laptop, logged into the trust account. I'd created it 4 years ago when Dad's insurance paid out and I was the only one who didn't blow it. I'd put the money into a structure my mother could draw from in emergencies, family only, and I'd made the mistake of believing we all shared the same definition of emergency. I navigated to permissions, revoked their access, froze the card, changed the password, enabled 2-factor authentication. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time, calling. I declined the call. I opened a new tab, typed one-way ticket, Florence, Italy. Not for revenge, not even to prove a point, just to leave the conversation. I scrolled past luxury flights, clicked a 12-hour red-eye with 1 layover in Lisbon, departing Sunday night. I entered my payment details, confirmed. Outside, the lawnmower had stopped. A quiet hum remained traffic, wind, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something. I went back to the rent portal, clicked submit, watched the payment spin, then clear. There was nothing dramatic in how it all unraveled. No broken dishes, no confrontation. Just me, in a threadbare hoodie, eating a banana over the sink and whispering one word so quietly I'm not sure I actually said it. Done. Because I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I was done being the account they drew from, the invisible spine of their storyline. I was done being the stable one who understood. I was done being quiet because I didn't need as much. The thing no one tells you about being the dependable daughter is that they will always assume your silence means consent. They forget silence can also be the sound of a door closing. To understand why a $6,200 wedding dress almost didn't even surprise me, you'd have to know how my family defines fair. It started early, not with money, not even with favoritism, just energy. My dad, Michael Morgan, was an accountant who loved jazz and owned 2 suits, one for weddings, one for funerals. My mom, Serena, was beautiful in the way that made other women suspicious and men just a little too helpful. She'd grown up in Georgia and always said she married into dullness. My dad, she liked to remind us, wasn't spontaneous. They had Ariana young, me 2 years later, but from the beginning it was like we were born into 2 separate families. Ariana was drama wrapped in silk tears on cue, sensitive to perfume, constantly nursing a sprain, a heartbreak, or a revelation. When she was 9, she stopped eating for 3 days because she got a B in art class and decided she wasn't exceptional. My mother stayed up with her all night, whispering affirmations and spooning soup into her mouth like she'd just survived a war. When I got an A+, they said, well, of course she did. I learned early that competence was expected. Crisis earned affection, and I wasn't a crisis. When Dad died, I was 24. Ariana was 26 and had just dropped out of her third grad program this time because the city's energy felt oppressive. Mom called me after the funeral and said, "Ariana needs a little more time to figure things out. You understand, right?" I said, "Sure." Because I did understand. I always did. Dad's policy paid out close to $400,000. I put my share in a high-yield account and later built a trust around it. I made Mom the temporary administrator while I worked 2 jobs and finished my master's in finance. It wasn't a gift. It was a buffer meant to be touched for emergencies only. Except, emergencies had a funny shape in my family. Ariana's yoga certification? Emergency. Mom's new kitchen backsplash? Emergency. Dog's behavioral therapist? Urgent. When I asked why the account balance kept dipping, my mom said, "You never need anything, Celine. You're lucky." Like luck was a flaw in my character. That was the theme. In high school, Ariana crashed her car. I lent her mine. She returned it with coffee stains and a dent in the side. She said, "Well, it still runs." When I got my first promotion and told my family over dinner, my mother changed the subject. "Ariana's trying to write again," she said, beaming. "She might start a memoir." "About what?" I almost asked, but I didn't, because she always had more room to be interesting. I only had room to be useful. After Dad died, I tried to pull away gently. I moved to another city, started therapy, worked late, sent gift cards instead of visiting. It helped, at first, the space. But then my mother got shingles and said, "Don't you care about me anymore?" Ariana got ghosted and posted a black screen on Instagram captioned, "Sometimes even your sister forgets you're fragile." So I sent money, again. Every Christmas, I was given a list. Ariana needed groceries, rent, a few self-care things. One year, I sent an Amazon order and got a text from Mom. "Can you not send conditioner with sulfates?" She's sensitive. I laughed, out loud, in my car. Then cried, because I knew it wasn't about conditioner. It was about the unspoken deal I'd signed without knowing. That my adulthood would be used to stitch up the holes in theirs. That being okay meant being used. I stopped bringing dates home. My mother always asked what they did for a living first, then quietly judged whether they'd be useful or not. Ariana flirted with all of them, jokingly, but always managed to make it weird enough that I didn't want to come back. Once I brought home a guy who worked in social housing reform. My mother asked, "So you're not, like, ambitious?" He laughed, but I didn't. We broke up a month later. I never explained why. It was around then that I started referring to them as the Morgans in therapy. Not my family, just the Morgans. It created space. My therapist once asked me, if they stopped asking for things, what would be left? I thought about that for a long time. The answer was silence. Because without the needing, the guilting, the backhanded love notes, there wasn't much relationship, just obligation wrapped in blood. And then came the bridal dress charge, which honestly might have been poetic if it weren't so predictable. I hadn't heard Ariana mention a boyfriend in months, but that didn't matter. She was always either devastated or radiant. It was the middle that made her itch. And Mom? She was the narrator, the enabler, the one who always found a way to explain Ariana's disasters as noble quests. She never remembered my job title, but always remembered my bank routing number. Once I tried to pull the plug on the trust, just to see how they'd react. I called Mom and said, "I'm thinking of restructuring it. Pulling out your name?" She went silent, then said, "Why are you doing this now? Is it because Ariana needed help with therapy?" "She's gone to 5 therapists in the past year." I said, "Which one is this for?" "She's finally doing better," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't ruin it. Ruin it." That's what it always came down to. The moment I set a boundary, I was the threat. Not the money, not the misused trust, me. I'd been funding their fantasy for so long they couldn't imagine I might opt out. But this time was different. This time, it wasn't a car or a therapist or a flight to Tulum because she needs a reset. This time, it was a wedding. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible. I didn't feel mad. I didn't even feel hurt. I just felt done. Done being the footnote in my sister's performance. Done being the bank behind someone else's dreams. Done being the daughter who's only valuable if she doesn't ask for anything in return. It never starts with a $6,200 charge. That's the finale. The betrayal before the silence. It starts with smaller things. Things that are easy to explain. Easier to excuse. Like the apartment. Ariana had been living in Savannah for less than a year when she called, breathless. It's this gorgeous brownstone, exposed brick. Morning light like you wouldn't believe. I was happy for her until she said, "But the landlord needs a co-signer, just for formality. Can I put your name down?" I hesitated. "Does Mom know?" She said to ask you. I should have said no. But saying no in our family was a hostile act, like slamming a door at a funeral. So I said, "Okay, just send me the paperwork." She did, and I signed. 2 months later, my credit alert pinged. Rent unpaid. I called her. "Oh, I meant to tell you. There was a mix-up with the bank. When I pushed, she snapped, "God, Celine, it's not like they're evicting me. Can you not make everything so dramatic?" I paid it off, quietly. But that was the first withdrawal. The second came a few months later when I noticed a $2,800 charge on my card. It was my backup card linked to the family Amazon account. I'd left it open years ago because Mom said it was easier for shared holiday shopping. The order? A wine fridge, 4 silk robes, a set of crystal flutes, and a drone. Yes, a drone. I called Mom. "It's for Ariana's engagement party," she said, like it was obvious. "The drone's for aerial shots. Madison's boyfriend is filming." "Engagement party?" I repeated. "She's engaged?" "Well, not officially," Mom said, "but they're in love. Again. And he's better than the last one." Why was I never told? "You're always busy," she said. "Besides, you don't really care about that kind of thing, do you?" Another withdrawal. That summer, they went to Cabo. The whole family. Mom, Ariana, 2 cousins, even Aunt Jenna with her sciatica and her new boyfriend. I found out from Instagram. They tagged a photo, "Morgan Women Retreat, Sisters in Seoul." Sisters. I hadn't even been invited. That part didn't hurt as much as what came after. A week later, my credit card pinged. A charge from the resort spa, $1,100. When I called, Mom said, "We meant to reimburse you." Ariana's card was acting up. I said, "You didn't tell me you were going." "You're always working," she said. "We figured you'd say no." It was said like a kindness, like I should be grateful they didn't bother. And then there was the dinner. I came home for Thanksgiving, first time in 2 years. The table was already full when I walked in. Ariana's friends, not ours. Madison again, some guy in a linen shirt who wouldn't stop talking about crypto. Mom smiled as I walked in and said, "Oh good, you're here. We were just talking about your ex." I blinked. "What? You remember Henry?" She said, "He's back in town. I invited him." And there he was, Henry, at the far end of the table, sipping wine like he belonged. He smiled. "Hey, stranger." I wanted to scream, but instead I said, "Hi," because that's what daughters like me do. We say hi while choking on it. Later that night, Ariana found me on the porch. "You're mad," she said, like it was a game. "Why?" "Mom invited my ex to Thanksgiving." "So?" She shrugged. "You always said you don't believe in soulmates." "That doesn't mean I want my past romantic failures as dinner entertainment." "You overreact to everything," she said. "This is why people stop telling you things." A few weeks after that, I saw a post on Ariana's story. It was her holding a book, 10 Ways to Heal Financial Trauma, with a caption, "When family makes you feel like a bank and not a person." I stared at it for a full minute. Then I texted her, "Interesting post?" She replied with a thumbs up emoji. I brought it up to Mom. She said, "You shouldn't take things so personally." Ariana's finding her voice. I asked, "Whose money was used to buy that book?" She didn't answer. They never called me selfish directly. That would be too obvious, too easy to fight against. Instead, they called me rigid, private, distant, cold. The kind of words people use when they want you to feel guilty without saying anything actionable. Ariana once told a mutual friend, "Celine's allergic to emotion." But the truth was, I wasn't allergic to emotion. I was allergic to expectation masquerading as love. Every time I asked where the money was going, I was being controlling. Every time I said no, I was making things uncomfortable. Every time I asked to be treated with the same thoughtfulness I extended, I was starting something. It wore me down, in the way small waves wear down rock patiently, relentlessly. Until one day I looked at my own reflection and realized I hadn't felt like a person in my family for years. I'd felt like a structure, something they leaned on, drew from, hid behind, but never looked at. The wedding dress charge didn't break me, it clarified me. It was the one that made all the other withdrawals visible at once, 1,000 invisible paper cuts revealed under sudden light. And I realized this was never a misunderstanding. It was the way it had always been meant to be. I just finally saw it for what it was. It happened 3 days after the charge. I hadn't answered any calls. I hadn't replied to any texts, not even the second. "Hey, talk to me. Ariana's fragile right now." Message from Mom. Then, on Saturday, I got a group email. The subject line read, "Ariana's wedding planning schedule." There was a Google Doc attached. I opened it out of morbid curiosity, and there it was, my name, listed under financial notes. Next to it, in parentheses, TBD, but she's offered to cover most of the event. Offered. I didn't even feel anger, just that strange flat chill behind the eyes. Then I saw the itinerary. The dress fitting was scheduled for Monday morning, 10 a.m. at the boutique I'd already paid for. And the location? Charleston, my hometown. They were flying in. I didn't even know she was getting married in the same city where our father was buried. No one told me. No invitation, no ask, not even a mention. My childhood bedroom, I suspected, would still have that dent in the door from when Ariana slammed it shut at 16 because mom didn't buy her the right kind of organic peanut butter. But now it would also have something else. A whiteboard. I drove in that night. I don't know why. I packed a weekender bag, filled the tank, and didn't tell anyone I was coming. The house looked the same: weathered shutters, chipped brick, and the same fake flower wreath mom had sworn she'd replace 2 years ago. The porch light was on. That used to mean welcome. Now it just meant occupied. I let myself in. The key still worked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of vanilla and something sharper, maybe new candles, maybe Ariana's perfume. The dining room was clean, the fridge humming. On the fridge, a magnet held up a photo. Ariana in a gown, smiling, champagne in hand. She hadn't even waited for the final fitting. Upstairs I found it, my old bedroom, and the whiteboard. Mon dress fitting twos, flower tasting wed. Table arrangements Thurs, rehearsal invite drafts free, venue walkthrough, mom says confirm with Celine's act. That's what it said. Not ask Celine, not check with her, just confirm. I stood there for a long time. My bed still had the same quilt, the same bookshelf, though most of the books were missing. My old debate team plaque, the photos of me and dad still on the desk, although one of them had been moved to make space for a scented candle, like I lived there, like I still belonged. Like I wasn't a ghost. I went back downstairs. Mom was in the kitchen. She hadn't heard me come in. She turned, startled. Celine? I didn't answer. She blinked. Honey, what are you? I saw the whiteboard, I said. She exhaled, annoyed. You weren't supposed to see that yet. I told Ariana to... Whose idea was it to charge the dress to my trust? She stiffened. Ariana said you'd offered. I assumed... I didn't. Well, she said, brushing her hands on a towel, your sister's been through a lot. You'd understand if you weren't so selfish. There it was again. Selfish. The word they threw like confetti over every decision I made that didn't serve them. She's getting married, Celine. Can't you just let her have this? Did you ever stop to ask if I wanted to be part of it? I asked. She's your sister. And I'm your daughter. She looked away. This isn't the time to dredge up old resentment. This isn't old, I said. It's ongoing. She's always needed more, Mom snapped. You've never needed anyone. I didn't answer. There was a pause. Not silence, just absence. Then she said, we're a family. Families do things for each other. Funny, I said. I've been doing things for this family my whole life. Can you name one thing this family has done for me? She blinked, as if I'd spoken in a language she didn't know. You're overreacting. That was always her exit line. I nodded once, left the kitchen, walked past the wedding photo, past the whiteboard, past the room that used to be mine. Outside, the night air was thick with Carolina humidity, the kind that clings to your skin and makes everything feel just a little heavier than it should. I got into my car, pulled out my phone, opened the bank app, trust frozen, card revoked, emergency contact, removed. Then I walked across the street to the ATM, inserted my debit card, and watched the trust balance blink on the screen. I whispered the same word I had before, only this time it felt different. Done. Not sad, not angry, not defensive, just done. Because you don't always need a clean break. Sometimes you just need to leave without telling them. And when they finally realize you're gone, it's already too late. No one notices the door when it closes quietly. The day after I left Charleston, I didn't go home. I went to the airport. No checked bag, no itinerary. Just a weekender, my passport, and a bookmarked list of places I used to look at when I couldn't sleep. I chose Florence. Not because I'd planned it. Not because I had a fantasy about healing under sun-dappled hills or drinking red wine in linen pants. I chose it because it was far, because it didn't hold any history with my name in it, and because when I typed one-way ticket into the airline search bar, it was the first city that didn't make me flinch. The plane left that night. No goodbye texts, no dramatic posts. I just went. The first 3 days were jet lag and silence. I walked the cobblestone streets with no real destination. Ate lunch alone in cafes where no one asked me who I was waiting for. I watched people argue in Italian, kiss on benches, feed pigeons, light cigarettes with one hand. It was strangely comforting to be invisible in a place that owed me nothing. I rented a tiny studio at the edge of Oltrarno, south of the river. The windows rattled when it rained. The walls were pale yellow. There was no TV. The mattress was too thin, but it was mine. No one knew the address, not even the bank. On the 5th day, I unpacked the sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. It still had a faint charcoal smudge from a drawing. I never finished my father's hands, overlapping mine, back when I thought art could make anything last longer. I sat by the window and drew a cup of espresso. Then the cafe window across the street. Then the girl in the red scarf who sat on the same bench every morning and cried without wiping her tears. I didn't post any of it. I didn't need anyone to know I was healing. I just needed to remember how it felt to create something no one would critique, borrow, or turn into a guilt trip. On week 2, I got an email from the gallery where I used to exhibit pieces years ago. They'd found some of my older work online and wanted to know if I was still creating. I replied simply, "I'm starting again." Replaced it with my attorney in case something happened abroad. I deleted the shared calendar. I unsubscribed from the family group email thread that only ever pinged when someone needed something. I sent one last email to my financial advisor. "No one but me has access to the trust now. Please monitor all activity and alert me if anyone attempts to manipulate the structure. I will no longer be responsible for protecting people from consequences they refuse to learn from." He replied, "Understood." I marked it unread, just so I could read it again. One afternoon, I bought a small easel from a street vendor. The man selling it was probably in his 70s. His shirt was ironed, shoes polished, and he didn't speak a word of English, but he pointed to the easel, then to my sketchbook, and smiled in a way that made me feel seen without context. That night, I painted my first full canvas in 7 years. It wasn't perfect. The perspective was off, and the lines wobbled, but it looked like me. Not the me they'd built out of need, not the daughter version, or the crisis manager, or the backup wallet, just me. At a flea market on Sunday, I bought a ring. It wasn't flashy, just a simple gold band with no stone. The vendor told me it was from the 1930s, that it used to belong to a woman who sold opera tickets from a kiosk. I slipped it onto my left hand, not as a symbol of someone else's promise, but mine. A promise to never again spend myself into invisibility. A promise to never again call obligation love. A promise to stop bleeding out just because someone else is holding a knife and saying, "Please." Some days I missed my dad. Not the idea of him, but his silence. He never told me how to be good. He just noticed when I was. That was enough. I remembered once after one of Ariana's boyfriends had broken her heart and she'd taken over the house with weeping and candles and herbal tea. He knocked on my door, handed me a peanut butter sandwich and said, "I know you don't make noise when you're hurting, but I'm here anyway." I never told Mom about that. She would have said I was being dramatic. I didn't tell anyone where I was. No, just checking in emails, no postcards with staged selfies and artful captions about growth. I didn't want to prove I was okay. I wanted to actually be okay. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a donor to someone else's recovery story. I felt like a person with an interior life that didn't need to be justified. One night, I opened the wedding planning doc again. I don't know why. It hadn't changed, but something in me had. I deleted the email, not in rage, not as a statement, just as housekeeping. Like finally taking out trash that had started to smell years ago, but you'd gotten so used to it, you forgot what clean air felt like. I didn't plan to stay in Florence. I just never planned to leave. 3 months passed. I took a freelance gig consulting for a local art nonprofit. They needed someone to organize finances, streamline donor outreach. It was quiet work, clean work. No drama, no guilt. No one asking for access to accounts they didn't understand. I paid rent in cash. I wore the same 3 sweaters on rotation. I went to the market every Sunday, memorized the stall layout by month 2. I learned to say no bag in Italian. I stopped explaining myself. And it wasn't a reinvention. It was a reintroduction to the version of myself I'd shelved for the sake of being useful. In early April, I submitted a portfolio to the gallery that had emailed me. They liked the work, asked for more. I didn't hesitate. I painted, daily, without audience, without Ariana's critiques. "You always draw sad things," or Mom's passive-aggressive comments. Why not paint something happy for once? I painted because I had nothing left to prove. That was the real change, not the city, not the language, not the little gold ring. It was the first time I wasn't living against anyone. I wasn't proving I could make it on my own. I wasn't healing to show them what they lost. I was just living. Then the email came. Subject, "Can we talk?" It was from Ariana. No. "Hi, no, how are you?" Just a single paragraph. "I know you're mad, but this has gotten out of hand. Mom's panicking. The wedding is in 6 weeks and the vendors are asking questions. I can't believe you'd actually freeze the trust. After everything I've been through, please don't do this right now. I need your support, not your judgment." I read it twice. Then I marked it unread and didn't reply. Because the version of me who would have explained herself, who would have softened the boundary to protect their comfort, didn't live here anymore. That version stayed in Charleston. This version? This version had left the room without slamming the door. 2 days later, Mom called. I let it ring out. She called again, then a third time, then left a voicemail. "Celine, you can't just disappear. Your sister is struggling. I know you think she takes advantage, but she's always been more sensitive than you. She's not like you. She breaks differently. Please, come home. Even if you don't want to help, just come home." It was the softest she'd ever sounded, but I'd learned something in Florence. Sensitivity doesn't excuse selfishness, and endurance doesn't mean you deserve to be the family mule. I didn't return the call. Instead, I transferred my artwork to the gallery. They scheduled a private viewing they called the collection Exit Wounds. At the gallery preview, I stood in a room of people I didn't know and watched them tilt their heads at pieces I'd drawn in silence. A woman in her 60s stood for 10 minutes in front of a canvas titled Inheritance. She had tears in her eyes. Later, she found me. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "You didn't paint pain. You painted a kind of survival I recognize." "Thank you." I nodded. That was all I could do. Because it wasn't catharsis, it was confirmation that my story had always been valid, even when no one in my family would admit it existed. That night, I walked home alone, past lit windows, past couples laughing at small tables, past the accordion player on the bridge who always played the same off-key version of La Vie en Rose. I sat at the edge of the Arno, legs dangling over stone, sketchbook in lap, and I realized I wasn't missing. I wasn't lost. I was just unavailable to people who thought love was a transaction. I was out of office to the emotional accountants who only knew how to take. The next morning, I donated the dress deposit to a local women's shelter. In Ariana's name. No receipt, no announcement, no explanation. Just one act that meant something. That money wasn't a punishment. It was repurposed. Because power doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like refusing to be bitter. Sometimes it looks like buying yourself a different ending, when you don't need their permission to live. They didn't realize I was serious at first. The silence confused them. I know that now because in the absence of my usual responses, they began filling the space with new performances. First came the texts. "Celine, come on. This isn't you. We're family. Mom's not sleeping. Ariana's having panic attacks again. You know how she gets when she feels abandoned." Then came the emotional footnotes. "We're not mad, just hurt. You could have said no in a better way. You always go too far. You always make everything about control." I read them all, didn't reply, because when someone stops showing up the way you've always expected them to, they call it cruelty, even if it's self-protection. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from Madison, Ariana's best friend, the one who used to borrow my clothes in college and pretend not to notice when I asked for them back. She left a voicemail. "Hey, just want to say, I don't know what happened, but Ariana's a mess. You were supposed to do this together. I hope you're proud of yourself," she cried at the cake tasting, literally sobbed into a 3-tier sample plate. "Hope whatever you're doing is worth it." I listened, then I deleted it, because someone else crying doesn't automatically make me the villain, especially when they built the party on money they never asked to use. A week later, Mom emailed again. Subject: Important update. "Celine, I wanted you to hear it from me. Ariana and Madison had to cancel the reception venue. Without the deposit from the trust, they couldn't meet the deadline. She's devastated. There's talk of moving it to the community center instead. I just hope you can live with what this has done to her big day. She wanted you there, you know. She wanted to walk down the aisle with her sister watching." There was no mention of the years I watched her walk all over everything else. Just the aisle. Always the optics. And then the wedding happened. Not in Charleston, not in Italy. In a local event hall just outside Savannah. Plastic chairs, buffet dinner, a photographer who specialized in maternity shoots and sweet 16s. Ariana posted the photos with thick filters and a caption that read, "Not what we planned," but still magical. And just like that, they rewrote the story. They always do. The week after, I received a letter. An actual letter. Handwritten. Mom's cursive. "Dear Celine, I miss you. I don't know how we got here. You've always been the strong one, the capable one. I suppose we leaned on that too much. I'm not saying we were perfect, but families make mistakes. They get selfish. They forget who's holding everything together until that person lets go. I'm sorry if we forgot how much you were holding. Please come home." I folded the letter, tucked it into my sketchbook, didn't reply, because I didn't need more apologies that would expire the second someone else cried louder. I needed space. And now I had it. At the gallery, my exhibit quietly sold out. No party, no press release, just red dots on canvases that once held everything I wasn't allowed to say out loud. One reviewer wrote, "There's a restraint in her work that borders on haunting. Each piece feels like something left unsaid finally getting air." I clipped that line and pinned it above my desk, not because I needed validation, but because it was the first time anyone noticed the silence wasn't emptiness. It was language. Ariana tagged me on Instagram a month later. A photo of her honeymoon, nothing extravagant, a cabin, some trees, a lake. Her caption, grateful for the reset, learning who matters most. I didn't like it. I didn't comment. I just tapped remove tag, not out of pettiness, just clarity. Because I wasn't part of the narrative anymore, and that's what they couldn't understand. I didn't want to hurt them. I just wanted out of the system that required me to be smaller for their comfort. The real revenge was this. I didn't show up. Not in fury, not in forgiveness, not as a witness, not even as a ghost. I just became a person they couldn't use anymore. And in the vacuum of my absence, the shape of their behavior finally became visible. Not to them, to me. I didn't go back. Not for the holidays, not for Ariana's baby shower 6 months later, not even when mom broke her ankle and left a voicemail saying, "Just thought you should know." There was no fight, no dramatic declaration, just distance. Like a house slowly sinking into the sea while the lights inside keep pretending they still work. People think closure comes with conversation, a breakthrough, a tearful apology. But I learned something in Florence. Closure isn't something they give you. It's what you build when they refuse. It's funny what fills the space they used to take. I started teaching part-time at a local studio. Nothing big. 8 students. Charcoal and watercolor, a 63-year-old named Marta who paints only bridges, a 17-year-old named Luca who never speaks but sketches ghosts in corners of paper no one else uses. On the second day of class, Luca stayed after everyone else had gone. He didn't say anything, just pointed to one of my old pieces hanging in the corner, a quiet portrait of a woman at a train station facing away. Then he looked at me and nodded once, like he understood something about me I hadn't said, and I thought, this is connection. Not the kind that demands access, the kind that recognizes presence. I still have the voicemail Ariana left after her honeymoon. You win, okay? You always win. Everyone's talking about how you've found yourself or whatever. I hope you're happy. I hope Italy is everything. But I miss you. Or maybe I just miss the part of you that let me get away with everything. Either way, congrats on the art show. Seriously. She tried to make it sound casual, but it was a eulogy. For a version of me she knew how to manipulate. I didn't call back, because there was nothing left to say. We'd already had our conversation, just not in words. The conversation happened in choices, in withdrawals, in the card I cut off, in the venue they lost, in the wedding photos I wasn't tagged in. Absence is a language, and they finally learned how to read it. One night, I walked the Ponte Vecchio alone. The streetlights hit the river in perfect angles. Tourists filtered past, speaking languages I didn't understand. Someone played jazz from a speaker tucked inside their coat pocket. It was nothing extraordinary, but I felt it. That deep, cellular kind of peace that doesn't sparkle, doesn't post, doesn't ask to be witnessed. It just exists, like finally standing in a room without needing to brace for something. Mom emailed again in the spring. If you ever come home, the door's open. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need the door anymore. I'd built my own house. One with no secret keys, no shared logins, no fine print hidden in love, just sunlight, space, and a front porch no one could enter unless I said so. I kept the gold ring, still wear it on my left hand. Sometimes people ask if I'm married. I always smile and say, kind of, because I made vows, not to someone else, to myself, to never shrink again for the comfort of people who only noticed my presence when it funded theirs, to never apologize for withdrawing access, to never call silence cruelty just because it finally sounded like peace. There was no monologue, no big ending, just me, in a city that asked nothing from me except to be real. A gallery with no plaques explaining my work, a life with no shared logins, and an inbox full of messages that didn't require responses. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer had to. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.